Breaking news today. Washington finds itself at the heart of another Middle East standoff. As Hamas reviews a Gaza ceasefire deal, politicians from both parties are claiming victory. Stay with us as we cut through the spin to uncover the true implications for the United States.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
BBC News reports that Hamas is reviewing a Gaza ceasefire proposal after President Trump announced that Israel has agreed to the conditions. Under President Trump's administration, there's a push for a 60-day ceasefire aimed at peace. We must question whether these efforts are truly about peace or if they represent the interests of global elites at the expense of ordinary Americans. Let's consider why the United States is once again at the heart of a Middle Eastern conflict that seemingly bears no direct relevance to our national security or economic prosperity. Let's do this.
The pressure and enthusiasm from Donald Trump about an imminent peace deal. The details still haven't been released to the public. I'd imagine the negotiators know what's in this deal. Certainly the Israelis will know what's in this deal because they were there when it was hashed out in Washington. But the red lines in the sand seem to be still there for both sides.
Far-right factions are vocal in their refusal to accept any deal that empowers Hamas, while opposition parties condition their support on the safe return of hostages. Their skepticism stems from past ceasefires that quickly unraveled in the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. On the other hand, Hamas demands a permanent ceasefire and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, along with Palestinian-led governance post-conflict. As negotiations proceed, we must remember that real peace cannot be dictated from afar by international mediators or Washington bureaucrats. The American public is still in the dark about the details of the purported imminent peace deal, despite frequent updates from Washington. The American people are familiar with this scenario. Endless negotiations, promises of peace, yet the cycle of violence and instability persists. This lack of transparency is alarming for anyone who values accountability, particularly given the deal's potential significant impact on both American interests and Middle Eastern stability. Any sustainable solution must prioritize the security of our allies, respect the sovereignty of nations, and importantly, keep the United States from being drawn into another protracted conflict that does not serve our national interests. While Israeli leaders and negotiators are well informed, the rest of us are left with unclear information. The vague humanitarian provisions in the current proposal, coupled with calls from international agencies for a major overhaul of the aid system, highlight the instability on the ground. The current administration is quick to claim progress, yet it's crucial to question whether these diplomatic efforts truly serve the American people or if they merely reflect Washington elite's pursuit of headlines, disregarding historical lessons from past interventions. As the current administration attempts to broker another deal, it is imperative to examine whether these efforts genuinely prioritize American interests or merely echo past errors.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday said that Hamas would be defeated and there would be no going back, so maintaining his pretty hardline position. Hamas, for its part, is still saying that there must be a long-term peace agreement after any ceasefire deal expires, because they don't want, as happened last time, a return to war with its devastating consequences. And also Hamas wants Israeli military troops to partially withdraw, at the very least, from Gaza.
Hamas, on the other hand, seeks more than a temporary halt to hostilities. The proposed 60-day ceasefire, facilitated by Qatar and Egypt and announced by President Trump, is presented as a crucial chance for both parties to de-escalate the core issues. Hamas's role, Israeli security, and Gaza's governance remain unresolved, casting doubt on the potential for a lasting peace. They demand a permanent ceasefire and a partial withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, citing mistrust in temporary agreements that merely postpone further conflict. The agreement includes a hostage prisoner exchange and sets the stage for indirect talks about Gaza's future governance. He asserts that Israel will not tolerate Hamas as a governing or military entity, rejecting any agreement that could perpetuate the cycle of violence. As Netanyahu prepares for his White House visit, the stakes are high not only for Israel and Gaza, but also for the broader region. This firm stance is influenced by domestic politics, as his coalition relies on right-wing factions that consider any concession to Hamas unacceptable. Netanyahu remains steadfast, signaling no intention of allowing Hamas any foothold in post-war Gaza. The humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate, with failing aid systems and increasing civilian casualties. From a policy perspective, there is a risk that Washington, influenced by international mediators and global institutions, might advocate for a superficial solution that overlooks the underlying causes and long-term security needs of the region. Their insistence on Palestinian-led governance post-war underscores the deep divide. Israel prioritizes security and the dismantling of Hamas, while Hamas views its demands as essential for survival and sovereignty. Without addressing the fundamental political and security issues, any humanitarian efforts will be mere temporary solutions to a deeper crisis.
I forgot to mention that, of course, for most members of the Israeli public and the Israeli government, the release of the remaining hostages, 23 of whom are still thought to be alive, is a must. I mean, that must happen, and I think it's very difficult to see how any peace deal from an Israeli perspective cannot involve the release of most, if not all, of the remaining hostages.
In summary, while BBC's coverage is complete in detailing the ceasefire mechanics and the humanitarian situation, it tends to downplay the complexities of Israeli domestic politics and the deep public skepticism about any deal perceived as capitulating to Hamas. A more balanced approach would involve greater scrutiny of Hamas tactics, more robust fact-checking of all parties' claims, and a broader range of expert voices, particularly from within Israel. The public remains wary of any agreement that might reward Hamas or compromise Israel's security posture. On accuracy, BBC News correctly presents the facts of the ceasefire proposal, including the involvement of Qatar and Egypt as mediators and the specifics of the phased release of hostages and prisoners. BBC News coverage of the ceasefire proposal and hostage negotiations often portrays these as a balanced diplomatic process, but lacks enough scrutiny of the underlying power dynamics and the risks for Israel. This sentiment spans across political lines, with minimal support from the right and only tepid backing from the left. This point is non-negotiable for most Israelis, who insist that any peace arrangement must prioritize the hostages' release before considering broader concessions. The network's focus on official statements sometimes overshadows the persistent distrust between the parties and the likelihood of Hamas using any pause in fighting to regroup. While the network highlights the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the suffering of Palestinian civilians, it tends to overlook how Hamas uses hostages as bargaining chips, accompanied by propaganda displays that have angered Israelis and international observers alike. Recent polls indicate that a majority of Jewish Israelis oppose a deal requiring Israel to release all Palestinian prisoners and halt military operations in exchange for the hostages. It could better humanize the Israeli hostages and their families, whose distress is a significant driver behind the government's negotiating stance. The network's use of expert opinions could also be improved by including more voices from Israel's security establishment and the families of hostages, providing a more nuanced view of the pressures Israeli leaders face and the real obstacles to a lasting agreement. This would provide audiences with a clearer understanding of why the hostage issue is so central and contentious in any potential peace deal. Visually, BBC News effectively conveys the scale of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza with impactful images and interviews with aid workers.
Yeah, and there's an awful lot of concern about the aid distribution mechanism, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But just when it comes to the ceasefire, our understanding is that Donald Trump is saying that the sides have to agree. Hamas, he says, has to take this deal because it will not get better. And on social media, he was writing, it will only get worse in caps locks. So arguably, he is really pushing for this.
Massively so, and it's a very good point you make about aid, because it might not be a direct part of the peace deal, but it's or the ceasefire agreement, but it's something that the international community and aid agencies will be really pushing for, as happened last time under the last ceasefire agreement. They want to drop this very controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation system because it's not working effectively. They say too many people are dying in and around the aid centres. What they want is for the UN, the other bodies like the World Food Programme, the World Health Organization, to bring aid in to their 400 centres around Gaza to the people who need it and get that badly needed food aid and medical supplies to the people who need it.
The stakes are high, not just for Gaza, but for the credibility of Western aid and the long-term interests of the United States. This scenario mirrors the current state of aid in Gaza, resulting in not just inefficiency but a tragic loss of life and resources, without a fundamental overhaul of the aid distribution mechanism, returning control to the United Nations and trusted agencies, with strict oversight focused on local capacity. The situation for the people of Gaza will not improve, and American taxpayers will continue to bear the cost of a failing system. Aid distribution in Gaza has become a logistical, humanitarian, and economic catastrophe. The so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, intended to manage this process, has disastrously failed. A recent successful flour distribution in Gaza City by the World Food Programme, conducted smoothly and without violence, highlights the inefficacy of the current militarized approach. The solution lies in proven decentralized systems that prioritize the needs of people and maintain limited, accountable American involvement. The current administration's demand for clear terms and final offers is a positive change. International organizations, including the World Food Program and the World Health Organization, are advocating for a return to the pre-war system managed by the United Nations and local agencies. From a financial perspective, the current approach is a clear example of how militarized top-down solutions designed by global bureaucrats fail to meet local needs and waste resources. It demonstrates that when humanitarian efforts are managed properly, aid can reach those in need without turning distribution points into war zones. In the United States, households are feeling the impact of higher food and energy prices, partly due to instability in the Middle East. This previous system, while not flawless, provided safety and dignity for aid recipients, unlike the new foundation, which has seen over 400 people killed in just a month while trying to access food. Real accountability and a shift away from militarized top-down aid schemes are essential to breaking the cycle of waste and tragedy. The destruction of Gaza's agricultural infrastructure, including greenhouses and poultry farms, has devastated the local economy and increased dependency on foreign aid. The tendency to manage from afar continues, often sacrificing efficiency and human lives. That's another interesting spin by the news media. Another ceasefire in Gaza is reportedly on the table, drawing the usual praise from global elites and bureaucrats. In contrast, President Trump's leadership prioritizes putting America first, steering clear of unnecessary wars and resisting globalist agendas. Who truly benefits from these endless interventions? It's fair to question why American families should bear the cost of conflicts unrelated to our security. For decades, both political parties have entangled us in costly foreign conflicts while neglecting domestic crises. The previous administration under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris pursued global approval at the expense of American sovereignty. Be sure to comment below while dropping a like and subscribing. Until next time.